Hi, I'm Hannah Durden and you're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. This week I'm joined by one of our directors, Tom Lowday, and we're going to be talking about the importance of play. Thanks for joining me today, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So let's start at the beginning. Can you talk to me quite generally about the benefits of play, why it's such an important part of kids' developments? So, kind of what does it look like? What do they gain from it that they don't gain from other forms of education? And that kind of whole, why is it so important, basically?
Oh, wow.
Sorry. Start with a big one.
Okay. Well, as the question kind of alludes, there are many different aspects of play and many different benefits because of that. I think, with my background in environmental education, I've come from thinking about the natural world. So if we're talking about evolution and our kind of place and where we are now in the world, and play was and is our natural way of early years development, and still in adulthood we can use play to support our understanding and experimentation and what have you. So it is our natural tool that we should be using. So I think it's a really important part of the toolkit that we should be implementing.
Yeah. What kind of benefits are there of play if we leave kids just to do it? What do you think they kind of gain from play alone?
I think the very essence of play is something that is spontaneous, so it can't really be forced upon someone very easily. So you kind of have to leave them to get onto it, and that means that people are able to take, let's say, risks or experiment in their own time, in their own way, when they feel safe and comfortable. So you've got that grounding of emotional and physical safety, like they can test their limits of how far they want to jump, how fast they want to run, or they don't, or they want to be able to sit still and understand what's going on around them and take stuff in at their own time. So I think there's that element of allowing someone to be themselves.
Yeah. And presumably there's a lot of social skills to be gained from letting a group of kids just play together.
Absolutely, especially if you've got a wide range of different kind of personalities and ages and genders and races and all that kind of stuff. If you've got a kind of inclusive set, there's so much that can be gained through play. Older kids can learn to be supportive and nurturing of younger kids and help them along, use different language to help people understand what you're thinking. So it's all that understand, getting what's in your head into someone else's head and vice versa, and having that discourse and allowing your imaginations to be the only limit that you're really confined by. Yeah. And I think that opens up the world and makes you be able to see things in a different way, in a different light, and challenge our immediate preconceptions about stuff automatically. I think that's kind of a really unique thing that play can bring to the way that we look at the world. Yeah.
Awesome. What's so special about outdoor play? What makes it different from indoor play?
I think for me personally, is the multi-sensory element of it is one huge thing. So, and it's this kind of changing dynamic as well. So we've got obviously an indoor space can be multi-sensory, but it can be at a point where it's kind of overloaded, especially in some settings where it's kind of noisy and rushing around and super busy. It can feel quite intense. I mean, I've been to kids' birthday parties before, and you come out afterwards thinking, oh my, what just happened to me?
We've all been there.
We've all been there, and it's kind of, and especially if you've got some additional sensory needs, that can be quite overwhelming, and is maybe for people that can tolerate, it's still put your kind of nervous system in that place of like, whoa.
I know, I go to a home ed group and all the parents hide in the kitchen because the sound just bounces off of the walls, and everyone goes, oh, it's too much. And once you're outdoors, it's different.
Yeah, and so you've got that kind of noise thing, and there could be, you know, stuff on the walls that's kind of like, you know, big, bright, colourful displays of kids' work or whatever they've done in a classroom and that kind of stuff. But there's, I think, you know, out in nature, we've got that sensory stuff, but it's coming through in all different angles. We've got the wind in our face, we've got the change in temperatures, we've got the, you know, the mud underneath our feet. Is that a bit squishy? Is it a bit slidey? You know, we've got different depths of field to look at as we look at things in the distance or close up. So it's already like naturally multi-sensory, so many different textures, so many different smells, and
it's basically provided a playground for us without us needing to put anything in there.
Exactly, yeah. And I think a lot of natural objects and sticks, just they're so uncomplicated that your imagination can just form them into whatever they need to be, or they can be constructed quite easily into different, you know, building dens or little houses, whatever you want to make. It all just happens so easily, and I find that kids intuitively do it. But if you've got like a set game, like there's only kind of one way it will ever kind of work or easily, so you're kind of already confined. Whereas if you kind of take away those barriers and just like, well, yeah, it's a stick, but it's also a hammer if you want to like mimic something that you've seen going on.
Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah, sky's the limit.
I was going to ask about, on a practical kind of note, how people could facilitate kind of inviting outside space for kids to play. And obviously we just said about how we don't really need lots of equipment, but are there any kind of key things that you think people should keep in mind if they're trying to have this outside space for kids to play safely?
I think there's recognising like the different needs of learners or you know, young people. So I think having at least areas where they can kind of create their own little zones and little spaces. So if someone is into, you know, small world play and maybe a more quieter approach to their play, that they can facilitate a different area for different kind of things happening. And other things to facilitate. I think there's that thing of just being able to follow the learners and what they're into, and having, you know, it's helpful to have like some things around, like having
like a mud kitchen for toddlers.
A mud kitchen for toddlers, but nothing that kind of, you know, there's infinite that kind of puts a limit on your kind of play. So is that kind of role play element, and it can get you into that zone there. And so it's like where there's kind of more suggestions rather than like set things. And forced kind of routes and paths and what have you.
Awesome. So Play England are a great organisation, and they do a lot to kind of talk about how important play is, and they make a point of saying that play is what kids, this is their quote, play is what kids do when not being told what to do by adults. So basically they're saying it's unstructured, it's unguided, and as you said earlier, it's spontaneous. So why do you think it's so important to let kids initiate play themselves, and that we don't try and guide or prompt it?
I think
I know you've got a lot of experience of watching kids play, so if you're, I mean, you do a lot of blog writing, I know, and it's like I always find this thing, if someone tells me to like, oh, go and write a creative story, it's like as soon as that kind of is put in front of me, I have this kind of block, and as soon as you become prescriptive about something, you're kind of using a different part of your brain. So it's like, you must do this is kind of an instruction. And so like play is not it's instructional kind of led. It's an organic kind of an organic process that happens. So if you kind of, it's not play. If it's forced. There's rules of, maybe if like you're playing a board game or something, there's rules, but
you still have that play element behind it as well, of like just talking and chatting and
and you can't force kids. Well, you can try and force them to play a board game, but generally, like they've willingly said, "Oh yeah, I'll play a board game," so it's still initiated by them. But
exactly, it's it's important that play is allowed to be play, and I think if we just stop getting hung up on like having outcomes, and trust in a process, which is not what we're taught to do in education so much. There's always like this kind of structure, and if we do this, we enable that. But I quite like the Montessori approach, where you kind of facilitate a space, rather than put stuff on people to do.
Which is kind of what our kindergarten did when it was open, and will do when it reopens, isn't it? Because their big emphasis is on play, which is different from a lot of other early years provisions.
And they still managed to meet all of the criteria that Ofsted were looking at. They got good at Ofsted, so it is possible just to allow this to happen, and then they kind of
the kids kind of met all those goals themselves.
And they just evidence and recorded from the play that very rarely was like a fictitious scenario kind of created to hit some objective. So
did you spend what kinds of things did you see the kids doing in the kindergarten, like when left to their own devices? Can you remember?
Well, a lot of it I see they would mimic what they'd been doing with their parents that weekend. I remember like coming along and they'd grab these sticks and were doing the strimming. Until you asked them what they were doing, they were just waving a stick around in the thing. And then they had invited their friend to play with them, and they were doing the strimming. And it's just it's so random, and then they can just like stop doing that and then move on to the next thing that sparks their interest, and they're quite happy just to drop something and like that was that in that moment, and then move on to the next thing that has sparked their imagination, their creativity, and they're just it's so bonkers,
so random. What they choose to do.
It's like hard to keep up with what their minds are capable of doing next.
Yes. Which kind of I guess leads me on to my next question, which is, have you got any tips about how we can let go and take a step back and just trust that process, like when it's so random and varied, like how we can kind of just kind of watch from the sidelines and trust that they're going to get what they need from playing?
Well, in our educational settings that we have here, they're all risk assessed, so there's a limit of what can go wrong. So it's just like, what's the worst that's going to happen? We have an hour of this time in our timetable if you're at school or whatever setting you're in, and if I just allow it to happen, and just experiment yourself, have a play with it yourself, and what's going to go wrong? But the benefit could be that actually there are some really good breakthroughs, and you can talk and interact with your learners or whoever you're working with, and find out what's going on and understand where the learning is yourself. And I think just like give it a bit of time, and just if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but what have you lost?
So it's a case of learning to sit on your hands sometimes.
Absolutely. Just give it a go. Just sit on your hands for an hour, go and play with the kids in your setting, and just get stuck in and kind of play yourself. And work should be enjoyable for you as well, or
parenting.
In parenting, and it's I think once kids get into that zone, and you can allow yourself as much as we can when we're conditioned adults to kind of be boring and sensible all the time. Once we get, it's like everyone's a bit more relaxed.
Yes.
And there is no fixed outcome, and there's no stress about this, and there's no stress about that, and things are allowed to happen in their own time. It's like everyone's like nervous system just kind of comes down a peg or two.
So there's health benefits as well from letting kids play.
Like
mental health benefits.
I don't know of any actual like hard evidence and stuff that I mean there will be stuff out there. But off the top of my head I can't think of any, but just out of my own experience, I think just seeing like people's shoulders drop and having no fixed outcome, no expectations of them, there's so much of our lives are structured and timetabled, and we need to be doing this and have to do that by then, and it's like you also need space in your life, and I think, you know, a lot of health and well-being initiatives with, you know, like meditation and what have you, is allowing that time and space for your mind just to kind of empty out and just let stuff flow through. Or those creative spaces are hugely beneficial to us, and I think play around away from screens and what have you is I mean there's that kind of dopamine hit from screens, but
but then you need to do more, don't you, to get the more of a hit next time.
And it there's nothing kind of achieved or anything collaborative about that. There isn't, you know, we know that loneliness, for example, is a huge issue that we're going to face more and more, and this pandemic has only exacerbated that situation. It's been on the government's awareness of being a huge problem, and play is an interactive thing. It needs to be done with other people. We are, you know, a social animal, social being, and it's our natural way. So we have to understand that we are part of nature. We haven't taken a different route. It's all there in us. And children have that natural instinct.
There was a report, wasn't there, I think, from a group of reception teachers when the kids had come back after the year out, and they'd said, oh, the kids are way behind with all their social skills because they've missed a year of playing, which kind of showed how important it was, because that reception year is largely play-based, isn't it, in a lot of schools, and then they'd come back in year one and lots of them really struggled with lots of things.
Yeah, my own son struggled a bit of like that reintegration as well, just going back into his school, and being all of a sudden again, after only just kind of getting introduced into school, to have to go back in again and kind of get used to it all over again, and not have the limited attention of one adult, a few adults around them, and it's been a huge adjustment for a lot of young people and probably their teachers and support workers as well.
And do you think play can be a useful tool to help them process these kind of things that they've gone through? Like, I'm thinking, for example, when my littlest was about 2, her friend's mum, this is convoluted, and had a C-section, and then the next week we went round and all the toddlers were playing this game, and we said, what on earth are you doing? And they said, well, we're cutting a baby out of her and then we're going to look after her. And they were just, because it would be like an emergency C-section, they were obviously then playing it out in their play to kind of process it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not trained in play therapy.
No.
We do
that'll
have,
be another podcast down the road.
we do have play therapy as part of the therapeutic offering that we have for some of our learners, and it is that kind of modelling in play of real life to get our heads around stuff and to understand our lives and our social situations and what have you, and we do that naturally through play. So absolutely yes, but to facilitate that in a more therapeutic way, then you really do need to get trained up for that deep kind of therapy. But it is a way of us processing and understanding the world. It is a major benefit of play.
Oh, awesome. I think last year when we did your talk, there's 2 things I want to talk to you about. One of them was, remember you telling me a story about where you'd had a kind of light bulb moment with play when you were working a session in the early days of the outdoors group. Don't know if you want to tell us a story. Do you remember it?
I do, yeah. Well, I was really keen on making all these different craft activities and getting the kids into doing a bit of green woodwork or creating whatever crafts, and that was kind of my passion I wanted to bring forward from rural crafts, and something I wanted to share with them, and that was really great for learners, and they did engage, and it was of value. But since that time where I've managed to sit on my hands with the prompt and support of my friend Chris, that I realised, the learners, I could change my approach from that experience of seeing the kids were just getting on, learning and having a good time, and just having so many benefits from being outside and being allowed to do what they need to do, that I could still take that approach to like the woodworking that I enjoyed doing with them. And it's like, right, I'd set up an area with the tools and have it all in such a way it was easy for me to ensure that they were being safe. So I had that like close supervision of safety, but not of objectives and outcomes. And that when they were bored or they'd had enough and needed to have a little break, I was okay with that. It wasn't like this time between there and you've got this project to do. It's like, well, you make whatever you want. Like, we'll have a go, we'll draw some pictures, make a little design and have a think about how that could work and what materials we need to gather. And when you're tired or what have you, we can pause that process and we can pick it up next time if you want to. I know it's only like...
What are some of the interesting projects, like the most interesting ones that kids made during that time?
Oh, they just walk up to you and it's like, I want to make a duck. And it's like, okay, we can make a duck. And it's just that great thing of saying, just like, not blocking any time. Well, actually, today we're making reindeer because it's Christmas and there's this and this. It's like, I want to make a duck. It's like, great. Let's make a duck. Let's make that happen. Like,
did they make a duck?
They did, and they were really, really happy with their duck.
Awesome. The other thing we spoke about last year when we were talking about play was about how kids and young people can gain skills from play for future employment, as the face of the workforce needs a different set of skills. And I think last year you spoke about the World Economic Forum, and they'd identified 10 top key skills for the future, which they divided into 4 categories, which I will put here in case people don't want to go and Google it. So they were problem solving, self-management, working with people, and technology use and development. And I kind of wondered, do you think most of those skills can be kind of learnt and honed through play, or which ones in particular do you think are going to be valuable for their kind of future workforce life, as it were?
With the technology one, I think the face of technology is changing all the time, and with AI and all these tech companies putting so much research and development into their products, I just feel like they're going to be so user friendly anyway.
Yes.
That it's going to be so easy to pick up and use intuitively.
Yeah. That
some of that technology stuff just won't be a problem whoever you are, however computer literate you are. I think behind that is how you use that technology and that problem solving and
the self-management
and being part of a team, all these kind of really important things that the AI and robots and technology can't do. The really special things that are about us being human. And when we are playing, we're understanding like social awareness, and we're experimenting with these different characters and feelings and making sense of the world, like we discussed before, and that all feeds into our development and these skills that they're talking about.
It's almost like a testing ground, isn't it? Because sometimes you watch kids play and you think, wow, they seem really cross with each other, but it's almost like they're experimenting with pretending to have a conflict so that they can learn to resolve it. Well,
you've got it. I think empathy particularly is a sense that we develop, and when we're able to do that in a safe way, where someone we all know that we're playing, like there's that unspoken rule between us. We understand that we're both playing. And so we can go into those different characters. It might be, I remember at school doing like cops and robbers and that kind of stuff, and you got that playtime thing where the good and bad, and experimenting with those different feelings and emotions, and you're doing it in a safe space. But the feelings can pretty much be up there. They are real feelings. We are feeling them, but we know that it's placed. So we've got that separation and removal. So it's not actually harming us feeling negative about being caught out by the
cop.
By the cop, or whatever the play scenario is that they've created. It's like we all know it's a game.
Yeah, yes, it's all fun. Yeah,
and yeah, so you've got that safe element to be one step removed from those real emotions that we're still feeling, so they don't affect us in a negative.
Can kind of practice feeling them.
Yeah.
And so obviously we've worked with kids of all ages up to 18. Do you think that there's kind of I know it sounds like a stupid question, but like you don't really think about teenagers playing. Like, do you think that there is still value to play for that kind of, 12 to 18 category? Do you kind of see them playing, or is it a different kind of thing?
Yeah, we do. But I think there's maybe like a hesitancy that's there.
Yeah.
I think it's a slightly larger barrier to break through, and there's a lot of that not wanting to look cool, uncool, kind of lose face or seem to be silly. But once you break down those barriers, like, you see the way they hold their bodies, the way they're smiling, the way they're presenting themselves, like, completely changes, and it feels really positive around them. And I think I personally feel like childhood gets shortened and shortened all the time with the kind of restrictions that the world is bringing on our young people. But I feel like it is a necessary step that you can't miss in order to properly develop. And I've been with some young teenage kids, and they've done singing, like, she's been coming around the mountain like singing kind of nurse, and they've just like, oh my God, I felt so good for that. It's like, this feels great. It's like, yeah, it does. But they had quite a difficult start in life, and they didn't have that.
So they didn't get that time to play that a lot of kids do.
They're just I know other people, they've maybe found something left over from a toddler group. Oh, they've got a little mouse here that they've been playing with, in a little wooden mouse from a toddler group, and they just start going into that small world play without before they've even caught themselves. Or sometimes we've set up games, so we are playing, but we have to crawl through the mud, and they are kind of more tactical, so hide and seek stuff.
Kind of
and they kind of started to break down those barriers. And I think once people like settle into it and just go, once they feel okay and safe, and the more and more they can let go. And it's the same with our adult learners when they're training in the forest school. They're just like, oh, it's been the best week, but they've spent so much of it playing, and experimenting, that it's not so many formal lessons beyond a lot of the safety instructional stuff that they need to know. But they're like, oh, I just had the greatest week regardless, because they've just been able to relax and be themselves for like a week and given themselves that time. And I think it's something that's beneficial for people beyond their teens. I think
presumably being outdoors is a key way of breaking down that barrier. People are more likely to kind of get involved and play outdoors, do you think? You're not so sure?
Yeah, I think everyone has a different approach. I think some people really struggle with getting wet and muddy and what have you. They're going to get hang-ups about that, and it might be easier for them in different surroundings. But I think, it's proven that people's kind of anxiety levels and what have you drop in the outdoors, and I think that's just a really good starting point for feeling like you can loosen up and just be a bit silly or
find
a bit experimental. Find your inner child and be okay with that.
Awesome. We're going to wrap up in a second. Is there anything else about play that you came to say that you haven't said? Is there anything that you think we've kind of missed?
I would say that it's just free. And if we can get outside, we can get out to the parks. If you're in an urban area, it doesn't cost you anything.
No.
Yes, you can facilitate like spaces and look at the Montessori stuff, but really, like, you can trust your instincts and just be okay with letting go a bit and relax into it, and understand that kids don't need to be told to play.
Yeah.
They do it. So you just trust this natural instinct, this
give
natural
them that time
process.
that they need.
Yeah, you just need time and space. And
Time
it's
and
like,
space.
well, don't fill it up with such organised fun.
Yes, yeah.
Organised fun.
Which is not as fun as unorganised fun.
Yeah, I find that as an adult in organised fun situations, I always want to disrupt stuff and be silly because it makes me twitch.
Yes, same. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. Finally, I'm asking everyone these 3 questions just to finish up.
Okay.
The first one is, how do you relax?
Exercise is one thing that I need to do regularly. I enjoy baking, so I like making bread. So that's something I do in the evenings normally.
Do you find it quite a relaxing process?
I do. It's like super advanced mud pies, and I do bring a bit of that play and experimentation, and sometimes it goes wrong, and it's a bit annoying, but I get over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I enjoy baking.
What's the worst thing you put into bread that didn't work?
The worst thing well, I think the most recent disaster was, the worst thing was too much water, and it ended up with like slop all over the kitchen counter.
And then it dried into like a solid crust.
I added too much flour to dry it up again. Baked a loaf more like a brick.
Oh no!
But it was all good fun, and regardless, and yeah, just having time with friends and family. I like going out with my kids and my partner, and love going to the beach, and I love walking on the moor like we did the other weekend. I love it all.
Awesome. And what are you reading or listening to right now? I know you're very busy, but
I've been listening to a lot of the YouTube channel of the School of Life.
Okay.
So that's a bit of my personal development and understanding. They're really good bite-sized chunks of psychology and understanding a bit more about myself and why I act and behave
in the way
that I do, and learn out that I'm not that special. They've all predicted my behaviours. I'm a pretty textbook kind of person in terms of my behaviours, which is really interesting, and also it's really good to have that foundation, knowing that we're all fallible and pretty useless and terrible, and that's kind of endearing, and what we should love about each other and support with each other. And it's nice to have that in succinct kind of bite-sized chunks.
So you're kind of driving.
Driving, or I just start doing the cleaning and tidying, doing a bit of vacuuming with your headphones on. Yeah. It's quite good.
Excellent. And finally, why is being outdoors important to you?
I haven't really thought of it ever being considered otherwise. I try to give space to listen to myself, and I know that I always feel better
once you're outside.
Once I'm outside. Why is it important to me? Just, can anyone tell me why it shouldn't be important?
No.
I have no defence.
No. Well, I thought it's an interesting question because I spoke to someone recently who's they live on Dartmoor, and their adult son, he apparently hated being outdoors and spent all his time indoors. And I thought, oh my goodness, how can you grow up on Dartmoor and hate the outdoors? And then I spoke to someone else who said, oh, not everyone's an outdoorsy person. So I thought I'd ask people that love the outdoors why they think it's so important to them. But obviously it's just your lifeblood being outside.
Yeah. Because I think I go stir crazy inside, and I feel, especially like going out in places like Dartmoor or with big open spaces, or looking out at sea. So you could, even if you don't like being outdoorsy, but you can find a nice cafe that looks out over the big expanse of the sea, and I like to feel small and insignificant. And
gives you a sense of place.
Yeah, a sense of place, but also kind of still feel part of it and belonging to all that. Just giving that sense of perspective about myself and about my life and what is and isn't important, kind of comes into focus more easily for me in a big open expanse in nature.
Awesome. Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining me today.
It's been cool.
And hopefully you'll come back to do another one in the future.
I hope so.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Bye. Thanks for joining us again today, Tom, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in to listen. If you haven't already, we would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast, if you would rate it, like it, whatever your podcast platform encourages you to do, just so that more people can find us and listen to us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please join us again in a fortnight where we'll be talking about well-being and mental health and how the outdoors can positively impact that. We'll see you then.